This is really the most important coverage for companies. It's the number one risk right now. It's in the news every day, and people are underinsured. And I'm just passionate about helping people with it. Really good tools out there. We talk about AI and how it's changing ransomware and how the hackers are getting in, but we have some really good AI tools or AI-enabled tools that are looking for ransomware, looking for abnormal activity, and shutting it down automatically. There was that company in China that had the fake Zoom call, where the employee was convinced to make five different $5 million transfers because he was on the call with this CFO and two other employees, which were all faked. So you can't believe your ears, you can't believe your eyes, and you gotta be able to identify someone with information that you can't find online.
The new CFO said, yeah, we need to buy cyber. And I said, I recommend that you buy at least a $10 million limit based on where you're at in terms of your revenue and all of that. And didn't bat an eye, bought it. And within 3 months had their first cyber claim. Like literally the year that I sold them cyber, they had a claim for invoice manipulation. And it ended up being a big one.
Cyber, because it's changing so fast, it's so hard to decide like how much you need. You can benchmark, right? See what other companies are buying. So that's like a way to look back. You can do ransomware calculators, like the one that CFC had. I know you had the head of cyber from CFC on. AI, it's changing the way that hackers are getting into our computers. Basically, they're using it for reconnaissance, so they can go on socials and your website and scrape your data easier in order to create spear phishing campaigns, like using your information, analyzing the way that you write. Like maybe you have a newsletter, they can analyze that and then create emails to your staff and spoof your staff. The easiest thing to do would just be listening to like the cybersecurity headlines and the CISO series podcast. Every day they have like a 2 minute update on what's going on. Bleepingcomputer.com is a great resource. And then, of course, Joe Earle's LinkedIn.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Power Producers Podcast, where we are refining and redefining the sales game. Today, I am joined by Joe Earle from C3 Insurance in San Diego, California, the Tampa Bay of the West. Somebody told me that, and I didn't believe them. And when I landed there for the first time, I got to my hotel room. I got to look out the window, and I thought, holy cow, they were right. This reminds me of being at home. It's almost identical from a vibe standpoint. But I think that it's interesting to see the difference in the cultures that are blended in San Diego versus Tampa, because it's more of you have a little bit more of a Mexican flair in some parts, whereas ours is more Cuban based on, obviously our proximity to Cuba, but very much Hispanically influenced in just really a cool town, man. I could hang out there a lot, and the weather seemed to be even better than what we deal with here. So welcome. Glad to have you on. I reached out to Joe because I follow him and we're connected on LinkedIn, and I know that he has really ramped up his content game over the course of the last probably 3 or 4 months and is really hammering down on cyber. And that's certainly something that we talk about and we think is important. So I wanted him to just come on and have us shoot the breeze for a little bit and find out what's working for him and what's working for us and share it with you. So welcome, man.
Thanks, Dave. Big fan of the podcast. Love what you're doing here. Yeah, San Diego is a great city. I welcome anyone to come visit. We are 45 minutes from the border. We have a lot of cross-border business here between us and Mexico. Ever since NAFTA, it's really blown up. And yeah, we're just lucky to have great weather and good people around.
So how did you get into the insurance industry? Or did you wake up as a child one day and decide that's going to be the track you want to take in life, or are you like the rest of us and you kind of woke up one morning and found out you were here?
Yeah, it's a funny story. My dad his first career was in the Air Force, and then after he got out of there after 20 years being a captain, he decided to get into insurance. And he had a second career as an insurance agent. It was funny. Every time he came home, he would, after like he got his monthly commission check, he would say, "Hey, look at my report card." So he would show us like his commissions and everything. And that was like the last thing I wanted to do. But as I got in after college and I got into corporate America, I was like, that insurance thing doesn't sound so bad. And at the time, my older brother Gabe, who's one of the agency partners here that started C3, he kind of coaxed me into the business. I started at a small agency, and now I've become a founding member of C3 here.
Good deal. So I feel like 100% of the content I see from you revolves around cyber. Why? Like what led you to go down that rabbit hole and really dig deep?
Okay, a few reasons, but I would just start with a story with a trucking customer that we had. I was at a trucking conference with the California Trucking Association, and one of the agency principals brought me over, and he's like, "Joe, my client here is going through a ransomware attack right now." So it was a Akira ransomware group, which is one of the bigger ransomware groups that had locked him out of his systems. They got through with a phishing email, and he didn't know what to do. He didn't have any coverage, and I was like, "Let me make a few calls because I'm entrenched in the cybersecurity world." And we got him connected to some guys in the East Coast who were able to help him. But before that, what really kind of convinced me that cyber insurance and having a plan in case of any type of ransomware or anything is so important is that he tried to deal with it on him by himself. So, the guy's a good negotiator. The ransomware started at 250,000 as their demand, and he actually convinced the hacker to go down to 115,000, and he was willing to pay that just to like get on with his life. But what happened is that when he put the 115,000 into Coinbase, there's a lot of like know your customer rules, and you can't just wash money through Coinbase that fast. So he put that $115,000 into Coinbase. They lock his account. So now his money's stuck in Coinbase, can't get it out. He's like texting every contact or second contact he has on LinkedIn that's related to Coinbase, trying to get that money out of there. He finally gets his money out, but he still has no way of paying the attacker. The deadline from the attacker is coming down. So he's trying to do all these things himself. We connect him to a negotiator and also a company called Digital Mint, who does a lot of the payments for insurance companies. And they were able to take a transfer from him to them and then in pay in Bitcoin to the attacker. There's a few other things that came up in that. You can't pay anyone that's on the OFAC list. So it's a list of basically terrorists.
Ladies and gentlemen, really quickly, in case you haven't figured it out yet, Joe is giving you a very good reason why you shouldn't sell anything other than a pay on behalf of cyber form. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to wait for the insurance company to pay you back.
Or have to go through all of this stuff, man. I mean, good grief. I mean, even with the Coinbase thing, I never even thought of that. I thought about people who maybe there is that unicorn out there that has enough money sitting in Bitcoin and they specifically put there in case, there was a cyber attack. Look at the roller coaster ride that's been on the last 3 years. I mean, it's tripled, it's cut in half, it's gone back up, it's gone back down. Like, I don't even know how you would manage that asset to make sure you had enough to cover a ransomware attack to begin with.
Yeah, it's an interesting case of hedging if somebody were to plan on getting ransomware and buy Bitcoin when it's lower in order to, have that money set aside. But in any case, this company was able to pay, and he was able to get the encryption key to get his data back. They said they deleted all the data online, but we know from FBI's takedown of Lockbit that the hackers never really delete that information. But anyway, yeah, like I said, that's kind of like what made the light bulb go off, and I was like, this is really the most important coverage for companies. It's the number one risk right now. It's in the news every day, and people are underinsured, and I'm just passionate about helping people with it.
So you mentioned corporate America at one point. Did you do anything before you got into insurance? Do you have a cybersecurity or a technology background?
No, I was always just the youngest guy at the agency, so I became tech support,
There you go.
and I've always been into tech stuff. I did I did get a concentration on my MBA and technology project management, but that was it really. And I just kind of learn things as I go, figuring out. You can figure out anything really. Everything's figure outable.
Yeah, 100%. You just have to be willing to put in the work to do it. And I mean, the internet makes it easy. It's got so much information at our fingertips today. Good grief. So what do you see as trends right now? I mean, what are you like? I can't imagine that the cyber environment on the West Coast is really any different than it is on the East Coast or anywhere else for that matter. I mean, right now, what we've seen more than anything else is an uptick in, I haven't seen as much ransomware as I have invoice manipulation and social engineering stuff. What are you running into from a like? Because it always interests me. It's kind of like flood insurance in Florida. How many people end up having a storm come through like we did, but for whatever reason still don't buy flood after? I think cyber is somewhat the same way. I can't tell you the number of times we'll call on a company and they've had a ransomware attack, but yet they still have no cyber policy in place. What are the things you're seeing on the streets when you're out talking to prospect?
Yeah, I think there was a report that came out in September from Delinea that talked about the trends that are happening right now, and they're saying like 47% of claims are due to access privilege access management. So think like credentials, multi-factor authentication. Those are some of the controls that you can do, like passwords and multi-factor authentication. But really, you need to, what privileged access management is all about is people that should only have access to what they need to do their job. And a lot of times people get in to a lower level employee's account, and then they can move laterally to lock out other systems.
And I would have to guess that of the people who are affected by that, a good number of them probably don't have insurance in place to begin with, because it's almost, I don't know of a carrier at all that'll write you anymore unless you can prove that you have EDR and multi-factor.
Yeah, you'd be surprised, Dave. Right now, the insurance market is so soft in cyber that they're writing anybody with a heartbeat. It's kind of like the industry didn't learn its lesson back in 2020, 2021, and we are basically underwriting based on domain scans, um, industry and sales with bindable quotes. So it's it's very easy to get a cyber insurance policy right now. Of course, if you have MFA, if you have EDR, MDR, um, backups, you're going to get much better pricing. You can get extremely good pricing right now. Um, like we just wrote a large food distributor that does over 500 million in sales for under 50,000. So that's like $1,000 per million in sales. So we're seeing prices like super low, and that was like for $5 million limit. So um, we're we're in a market right now where there's really no excuse not to buy cyber insurance. The prices are good. People are um, able to get insurance without having so many controls. And I think you talked about this with some of the other cyber people you had on your podcast. Cyber insurance companies are coming in and giving controls and giving
Well,
discounts.
that's what I was going to say, man. You got companies like Alpha Secure that if you don't have it, they're going to require you to have it, but they'll give it to you. They'll actually implement it for you.
Absolutely. And companies are coming in with their own incident response teams. Um, I mean, if I could tell anybody out there, just have a plan. Like an incident response plan will go so far into mitigating your loss. If you have insurance or not, you can have like who you calling first, alternate ways to communicate with the board, alternate ways to communicate with your employees besides email, right? Because number one, you may not be able to use email. Number two, the email may already be compromised. So you don't want to talk on email when the hacker already has access to that. And you just can go through that plan and not do like the panic thing that everybody does, where it's like, everybody shut off your laptops, let's unplug everything, you know what to do. You've already like gone over these things, hopefully with your incident response team that you've already uh, gotten a retainer with, and you've got the logs to know how the hacker got in and everything like that. So there's so many things you can do beforehand to plan, but companies just don't take that time because they're worried about the bottom line, which is kind of backwards, right?
Yeah, I agree. So, one of the pieces of content that I saw you put out in the last day or so was about determining limits. And I think that this is a conversation that probably can't be had enough because it's such a I want to touchy's probably not the right word, but people get weird, like producers specifically get weird when you challenge them about offering the right limit of things because they're afraid that somebody's going to think they're being pushy, trying to sell them more insurance they need. And so we all, they default to a $1 million cyber policy because that's what the baseline is. That's the easy one to get, right? And
Right.
I had a conversation. I've not had them on the podcast yet. I'm waiting for them to schedule with CyberCube. I don't know if you're familiar with those guys or not, but it's pretty interesting product that if you're an agency who sells a bunch of cyber, it would be worth you having in the agency to make sure you're protecting your own, E&O limit at that point. But when we had Zane from Pro Writers on, I've referenced this story probably literally every podcast since we've had him on. It's that important. I asked him, what's the average cyber claim across the book of business right now? And he said $4 million, $4 to $4.5 million. And immediately my mind is like, holy crap, man, how many $1 million cyber policies do we have on the books? And what are the, what should we really be offering these people? And what does that approach look like? And so, when I was on the demo with CyberCube, he asked me to give him the domain and name and information on an actual client that we had cyber on. And this was a company that I've represented them almost 20 years now. And for 18 of those 20, I hammered them to buy cyber and they didn't want it for whatever reason. And they had a CFO transition and I survived that as the agent. And the new CFO said, "Yeah, we need to buy cyber." And I said, "I recommend that you buy at least a $10 million limit based on where you're at in terms of your revenue and all of that." And didn't bat an eye, bought it. And within 3 months, had their first cyber claim. Like literally the year that I sold them cyber, they had a claim for invoice manipulation, and it ended up being a big one. And again, even though I sold 10 million in limit, this is $100 million plus a year company. I'm asking myself, is this even going to be enough?
Mhm.
And when I was talking to CyberCube, they basically go through and they show you by limit your percent confidence rating that percentage of claims will be below whatever that limit is. Thankfully, at 10 million, 99.8% of the claims possible would be below that limit. So I felt at least somewhat comfortable that I'd offered them the right amount. And the claim settled for well below that, but you never know what the next one's going to look like. How do you go about determining the limits that you offer people unless you have a tool like that? And I'm asking that sincerely. Like, is there a formula that you use? I kind of have always just sort of looked at, what are the business income ramifications? How many records do you have? How many people could this actually impact, but I don't have any scientific formula that I use to come up with the numbers, which is one of the reasons why I did a demo with CyberCube.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question because how much insurance do I need is not an easy question to answer. With property, we can do a replacement cost valuation and find out right away how much it is. We can look at your rents and decide, how much you need for business income. With cyber, because it's changing so fast, it's so hard to decide like how much you need. You can benchmark, right? See what other companies are buying. So that's like a way to look back. You can do ransomware calculators like the one that CFC had. I know you had the head of cyber from CFC on. That's a good tool. You can look at like the average downtime for a company, like it's around 14 days. So you can multiply, their sales or divide their sales by, 26. But I think we need new age tools like CyberCube. We do use CyberCube tools when we talk to our insureds, and it's a way of looking forward instead of looking back at different claim scenarios. I think they do like 50,000 different claim what are they? Not scenarios, but like simulation. They do 50,000 simulated claims in order to see like what if they had a ransomware? What if they had a system failure like CrowdStrike? And then they give you an aggregate amount. So I like to look at the aggregate to give like a general, but then I also go down to I think it's like the third report on ransomware, because ransomware is so prevalent that I say, this is your aggregate. It's like an average of all these claims, but we really should be looking at this one down here where you want to look at like how you're going to transfer all your risk based on the worst case scenario. So yeah, we love that tool. It's great. Those guys are, I think, in the forefront of risk transfer and computation.
Yeah, I think for the average producer at the average agency out there, cyber is a huge landmine, to be honest with you. They're either not offering it at all, or if they do offer it, they don't really have a way to calculate a limit. And if they did, I don't even know that they're confident in offering the limit, because at that point, what if they miscalculated? It's a weird situation, man, because we have a duty to offer. Like that's our job. Our job is to offer reasonable and prudent coverage for the businesses that we represent. And I think a lot of times we're so worried about losing the sale instead of doing our job the right way that we allow the client or the prospect to dictate what it is that we offer them, how we offer them. And we got to do better as an industry at explaining what our role actually is. Look, I get it. We're paid a commission. We do make money if we sell you a product, but at the end of the day, we also have a responsibility and a duty to you to protect your business the right way. Because if we don't, the one thing I know with absolute certainty is you're going to have a really bad memory that we had this conversation and I'm going to be the one who gets blamed for it. So I have to have this conversation, even if it's at the risk of you thinking I'm trying to sell you insurance that you don't need by your own perception. Need to take the time to educate and offer to protect myself. Like, and I don't know that we always think that way. I think that cyber is a gaping hole. I've said this before: flood, umbrella, cyber, and EPLI are 4 places in every agency that I would be looking right now if I wanted to, number one, round out my book, but number 2, make sure that the agency is actually protected and that we've offered the coverages that we should have offered and that we've offered them at the right limits. And whether or not the client bought them really is that the onus is on the client for that. But if they chose to go against what our recommendations were, we got to make sure we have rejection forms on file showing, hey, we offered it. These are the limits we offered. We went all the way up to 5 million, but they only wanted to buy 1, and that was against our better advice. But at the end of the day, 1's better than none. So that's where they ended up. And here's the rejection form showing that they didn't want to buy 5, they didn't want to buy 3, they didn't want to buy 2, they wanted to buy 1 million. And that might give you a fighting chance to not lose an E&O case. You're still probably set up in some way to where you're going to end up having to file a claim. But I think it's an unknown to a lot of people. And that scares them as far as how to approach it, how to calculate the limit, how to educate the client in the right way. Because the reality is, and look, I don't mean any disrespect whatsoever to any agent who does this. I'm just telling you, you're not doing it right. Okay. A BOP with an endorsement for cyber on it is not properly protecting your client for cyber. Like that's not how you do it. So if that's your sleep insurance at night saying, oh no, I wrote a BOP and I put the cyber extension on it, I wouldn't be sleeping very well if that's what my solution is.
Yeah,
We're
those Bob endorsements, just to hit on that real quick, they're a false sense of security. They're they're good. They're better than nothing, but I mean, if you read into them, you could have a ransomware attack and it could have ransomware on there as a limit, and you're not covered because that attack group or hacker group didn't target you specifically. So there's all these caveats on those bops, and there's no reason why you shouldn't buy a standalone cyber policy. It's really not that expensive right now, and you're going to get so many more coverages on that.
Well, and especially with the number of people who work remotely, there are a lot of cyber forms that won't provide coverage if whatever the trigger is didn't happen in a company-owned computer or machine. What happens if somebody's working remotely on their own laptop and they go in and access company systems, and that's where the attack originates? There's forms that'll specifically exclude that from coverage because it's not on the company system. They
Yeah.
might access the website or whatever, but if it's not a company owned laptop, and in our case, all of our stuff is handled by a managed services provider, so there's really no reason for anybody to operate outside of the equipment that we give them. And if they did, that's a whole other conversation I need to have with the team member. But
Right.
we do it for that reason. And we had a claim that we're dealing with a marketing company right now that um, works with people to create digital ad campaigns on Facebook, LinkedIn, various social channels. And someone got into their Meta account that managed the ads for all of their clients. And they were able to run up a bunch of charges that were for fraudulent ads. The ads didn't really even happen. And I remember sitting there on pins and needles keeping my fingers crossed that the employee that ended up being the one who had the vulnerability, just praying that they were on one of the company's systems, and that's where it happened. And thank God it did, and they would have had coverage. Otherwise, it was pretty clear that this particular carrier was not going to cover it if it was a personal laptop that they accessed the company Meta account on.
Mm. Yeah, the bring your own device problem is hard to deal with, especially when people are working remotely. Maybe their computer didn't work that day and they had to use their personal. I mean, everybody has a personal computer in their hand, their phone, and not a lot of companies are giving people, iPhones to use for the company. So a lot of companies are just giving them a a monthly stipend for their cell phone, so they can use their own device. But most people have Outlook on there. Most people have Salesforce and other business systems on their phone as well. So yeah, that's definitely a problem. And if you have an exclusion on your policy for that could be a wedge that you could create with when you're when you're comparing policies for sure.
Yeah, 100%. So market soft, you're saying it. Literally everybody that I've talked to from a cyber carrier or MGA says the same thing. When does it start to turn back the other way again?
I think it's I think we're at a bottom. I mean, I don't think it's getting softer. So I I think it's gonna I don't know if it'll turn. I think it's stable. I think it'll be like this for at least a couple years. Um, what's really good is that because of 2021, 2022, insurance companies have gotten better at underwriting, and they've gotten better at enforcing people to uh, put in these controls like MFA, EDR. And they've also incentivized people to have like EDR and things like that. So there's specific programs where you can get like pretty big discounts for having managed detection services, which is basically um, second generation antivirus, if you want to dumb it down. But they have at every endpoint, which could be your phone, a server, or a computer, you have an agent on there that's looking for, um, abnormal activity. That really helps. There's also really good tools out there. We talk about AI and how it's changing ransomware and how the hackers are getting in, but we have some really good AI tools or AI enabled tools that are looking for ransomware, looking for abnormal activity, and shutting it down automatically. So there's a lot of um, good things that have happened in the last few years. I think people's backups have gotten better too. And people are restoring from backup more than paying ransoms. So I think overall, I wouldn't say the landscape is rosy because this year has been really hard for ransomware, especially in certain industries. And we may see certain industries like financial services, healthcare, and others like that have been hit really hard. Their premiums may either go up because companies are taking rate, or less companies are doing those, are just like getting out of those industries because they don't want to deal with those kind of severity claims.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is, you know, we need to think about the right business decision sometimes too when we're placing this coverage. And I've used this example before with auto. If I bring in a fleet that's running hot, I don't necessarily want to go put that with one of my blue chip carriers right out of the box, if we haven't been able to get our arms around it yet. But I think with cyber specifically, there are some carriers in the admitted market, Chubb being one of them, who has a pretty good cyber product, honestly, but you don't really see the standard carriers offering a cyber product from a coverage and pricing standpoint in most cases that stacks up to the things you're going to see if you go to the wholesale market to get coverage. Even if I was going to place cyber with an admitted market, I would still probably do it with a wholesaler. And the
Mhm.
reason why is I want them to eat the loss ratio, man. I mean, why would I want to put my entire contingency at risk over a single cyber claim when I can literally transfer that risk to a wholesaler who has a much larger book of business? And what's the cost? You know,
Right.
$5,000 in premium for a cyber policy on a plumbing company with $1 million limit, and I give up 5 points of commission on that. I mean, it's $250, and I could be literally giving up six figures worth of contingency commission if I were to have that blow up my entire book.
Yeah. Well, um, I guess there's two things on that. You have the agency principal perspective because you're compensated based on contingencies as part of what you do, but most agents aren't compensated that way, so they don't have an incentive to do what you're doing
Well,
unless.
their agency principal should educate them on it. I mean, at some point, especially if you're going to perpetuate the agency, you need to train your staff to think like a principal now, not when they're a principal.
Absolutely. And the other part that I would say is that that may naturally happen because the preferred carriers aren't going to write the companies without MFA, without EDR, or they're definitely going to enforce MFA. They're going to enforce callbacks for funds transfer. So naturally, that may already happen where you can't get the person into a standard market if they're not doing those controls.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And honestly, man, even with the stuff I've looked at, almost 100% of them require that. Like, I'm blown away that you're able to find carriers that aren't making it a requirement right now. honestly, I think they're doing me a favor. I don't. It makes it easier for me not to have to fight that battle and explain why it's not important. If the insurance company requires it, I can just blame them for it and then
Absolutely.
educate them on why it's all important anyhow. But it's a non-negotiable at that point, regardless. So, um, what else? What else are you into? I mean, we focused all of this on cyber thus far. I mean, is that predominantly what you write and what you go after, or are you going after general business and then you're focused? You are deep in cyber because it's just a passion for you and it's something that you recommend to all your clients.
Yeah, I was a generalist for about 12 years. So I still have a book of a lot of different types of clients and coverages, but I've recently become like the cyber broker of C3. Um, so I'm strictly working on cyber. But I do you know, work on some other stuff as well, just because, we need to help people out there, and if I have the skills to help them have a better policy, I'm going to do it. But I'm really focusing on cyber. I'm targeting for cyber, and that's why all my content's about cyber.
Yeah, so what's that? That was kind of the vibe I was getting. So, I mean, what does that look like? A producer at C3 goes out, they bring in an account, but you're looking at the cyber portion of that as the expert inside the agency on their behalf. Is that how that's set up?
Absolutely. Yep. So it's kind of like a in-house referral type deal where like if you have a, a benefits lead, you're going to give it to the benefits department. It's a lot like that here. So if somebody has something for cyber, I'm like, me and my team are the cyber department, and we're gonna hit on that. So that, yeah, like I said, the big food group I was talking about earlier, the agent is doing the general liability, workers' comp, all the other lines, and he brought me in on the cyber. It um, gives them an expert for the cyber part, which is a differentiator for the agency, and it also gives them another point of contact um, to work hand in hand with their CTO or uh, Chief Information Security Officer to place that business and work hand in hand to make sure that they're getting all the subjectives done and do all that other stuff that may or may not come up.
Yeah, but you know what, man? I actually like the strategy of having somebody who's the expert in the agency because I feel like, especially for as much as cyber's a moving target with the constant evolution of the threat landscape, in addition to the coverages offered and the coverages that are reduced or not offered anymore, that's almost a full-time job just keeping on top of all of that. And I don't know how a producer, if they were focusing on going out and bringing accounts in, could stay on top of, like, GL doesn't move that quick. Auto doesn't move that quick. Cyber could be different tomorrow morning when we wake up, depending. Obviously I'm being sarcastic, but the reality is it does move really quickly. I think agencies, that's something that they should explore, is having somebody who just literally champions cyber in their agency and that's all they do. I think that, producers don't really have any room to bitch about it because if they were going to write it, they would have written it already. And this gives them an opportunity to protect their client better with, quite frankly, a better resource if somebody only specializes in that. And, the agency benefits from that by rounding the accounts more. And it probably also helps with retention to some degree too, because you're closing another gap that somebody could come in and wedge their foot in and use to open the door against you. So I think that's an interesting model. And not necessarily against doing it here, to be honest with you. I need to think through what that would look like. But, I complain about it enough that that might be a better solution than trying to continue to beat on the heads of my producers to make sure they're doing it the right way.
Yeah, and it's fun. I really enjoy it. I'm constantly educating myself on cyber, either by reading the headlines, listening to podcasts, um, I think you mentioned the CCIC course with Chubb and Carnegie Mellon on another podcast.
Oh yeah, I know a couple people who have been through that and rave about it.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through that right now. We just did our second session in Austin, Texas, and it's a great program. Chubb does such a good job. The professors from Carnegie Mellon are top notch. I mean, some of these guys are like the guys that like created certain cybersecurity controls. Like you're one of the guys that was our professors was part of the first incident where the Chinese military were indicted when they indicted those four Chinese military people for getting into Alcoa. He was the CISO for Alcoa at the time. And he worked with the FBI over like 5 years in order to take these guys down. So the quality of the program is great. So anybody that's in cyber should definitely look into that. And Chubb's a great partner of ours. We like working with them a lot.
So you said you like to continue to educate yourself, stay on top of things. What's your favorite resource right now? If you were to tell, if a producer said, "Look, man, I don't have time to go 15 different places. I only have time to go one." What's your favorite place to go to stay on top of trends in the cyber industry right now?
I mean, the easiest thing to do would just be listening to like the cybersecurity headlines and the CISO series podcast. They're every day they have like a 2 minute um, update on what's going on. Uh, bleepingcomputer.com is a great resource. And then of course Joe Earl's LinkedIn.
There you go. I
You can
mean,
follow me.
never ending supply of content there.
I like to think my videos are entertaining and educational, so you can check those out as well.
Yeah, you've really ramped up, man. I mean, I feel like you've put a like doubled down on content production because you've been invading my feed. I don't know if it's just the algorithm changed or if you've actually been putting more out, but it seems like every day I'm seeing a couple of things, and I realize you may not be putting them out, all at the same time, and they're just showing up. But have you really put more of an emphasis on that recently, or is it just that my algorithms changed?
Yeah, what I did was I hired a social media manager,
There we go.
and that took a lot of the editing and posting off my plate because I'm kind of ADHD when it comes to creating and posting content. So I would go in fits and starts, which for content, is not ideal. You want to be consistent and have things like every day, right? So by um, using, my resources, I can record videos, do things like this, be on camera, which is the part I like. I did like the editing too, because you're like learning and figuring that stuff out as you go. CapCut is a great resource if you're starting off and you're just trying to edit things by yourself. It's free. There's a free version of it, and you can do pretty much 75% of what I'm doing by just doing the free version. And yeah, so basically outsourcing that part of it has helped me be more consistent and get on your feed.
Well, I mean, it makes sense, and I do the exact same thing. So, obviously, subscribe to that thought process. We've been going almost 45 minutes, man. What have we missed? What do we need to get out there that we haven't talked about yet?
Uh, I don't know. AI.
Sure. What do you want to talk about AI?
It's changing the way that hackers are getting into our computers. Um, basically, they're using it for reconnaissance, so they can go on socials and your website and scrape your data easier in order to create spear phishing campaigns, like basically using your information, analyzing the way that you write. Like maybe you have a newsletter, they can analyze that and then create emails to your staff and spoof your staff in order to basically, you know, do social engineering. I think you were talking about that actually, where somebody was trying to cache like a sub $10,000 check.
Yeah, happened to us. It was a good one too. The email was very good. I It was from me, so when I read it, I was easily able for me to pick out where the discrepancy was versus something I would have actually written, but it was pretty darn close, man, to be honest with you. You know, the other place I see AI playing a role is in voice cloning too. There's been a lot of stuff that's happened with voice cloning that hackers have used for different things. And I've seen some claim scenarios, but I think we're going to continue to see more of those.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a case just recently with the CFO of Ferrari. So the CFO of Ferrari got a call from the CEO of Ferrari, which the CEO of Ferrari's voice was spoofed, and the CFO was ready to make some transfers, and he he was smart and he thought that it was a little bit fishy, and he asked the hacker, what book did you recommend to me, you know, a few months ago? And the hacker had no answer for that. So he was able to thwart that hacker right there. But we need to have other controls besides, our cybersecurity controls. We need to be able to identify people in different ways than just their voice, the way they look. I mean, you saw there was that company in China that had the fake Zoom call where the employee was convinced to make five different $5 million transfers because he was on the call with this CFO and two other employees, which were all faked. So you can't believe your ears, you can't believe your eyes, and you gotta be able to identify someone with information that you can't find online. Maybe it's using their calendar. Like what appointment were you in a few months ago? What did we talk about? A few days ago. You can't even use their pet's name because that stuff's out there. So
Yeah. Honestly, like a verbal password, something that's unique to each person that's kept on. I mean, obviously if you keep it on record somewhere, I don't know, but I mean, the book recommendation thing I think is interesting. Um,
you need a safe word, right?
Yeah, so I was gonna say, have some kind of a safe word. Like I have to have that when ADT calls if the alarm goes off, which in our house more often than not it's actually the smoke detector that's going off, and ADT calls for that because we're burning something in the kitchen. But I have no idea. Like I rattle off like 5 words that it could be because I don't even remember what I gave them at this point, and I always get it in one of those 5 words. But yeah, even something like that would be helpful. But it's amazing to think that in order to combat something that technologically advanced, you have to go back to something so simple as a verbal password that's understood between people to clear it up.
Yeah, and I would even encourage people to do that with their wives, their kids, because there's a lot of deep fakes where people are faking um, actual ransoms and actual kidnappings. So to be able to
I've
know,
listened to some of the recordings, man. Like I've listened to some of that stuff online. It's pretty crazy.
well, you go into fight and flight mode right away, and you're like, I need to help my son, or I need to help my grandson. A lot of times it's like, hey, don't tell my dad, you know,
Yep.
I'm here in Mexico and I'm in a really tough situation. And the grandparents, which unfortunately are easier to trick, will pay that ransom. And maybe the grandson is just at his house watching TV.
Hmm. Yeah, I think one of my favorites of all time was the one, and you've probably heard this. I don't remember if it was in a TED talk or when it was, but it was essentially showing how easy it was for a female to call. It may have been AT&T. It was one of the cell services, but just to show how easy it was for this person to call and add a line to somebody else's phone account with literally no credentials whatsoever. And the whole thing was done based on them manipulating that person's emotions and wanting to help them based on her having what sounded to be an absolutely atrocious day at a stay-at-home mom with kids screaming in the background. and everything else, but she got everything done that she wanted to get done. And it's scary, man, because you think about it, how many times could any of us be susceptible to that? And the problem with all of this is the hackers themselves are getting more and more advanced every day. To your point, they could compromise email and you don't want to go back and forth on email, but they're also extremely patient. Like they'll sit on email for a month, 2 months until the right time, and they'll know the right time based on all the conversations that they've been monitoring, and that's when they throw the hammer down. So I mean, being vigilant is 24/7, 365 at this point, and you almost can't trust anybody, because especially if you can't see them in front of you telling you and even then it can't be on Zoom, as you just said, because they can fake a Zoom call.
Yeah, business email compromise is huge, and this is one of the myths that people constantly go at mention, is that they don't have any data for them to steal. And I think contractors especially need to hear this part, is that you may not have data for them to steal, but you have a bank account, you have invoices, you have large transactions that are going for supplies. You may have real estate transactions that are happening. And if that hacker is sitting in your email, they're going to be tipped off whenever you need to have that big transaction, and they're going to cash out. And if you don't have coverage, you're kind of out of luck.
And the main reason that that hackers are going to target them is because these people don't feel like they're susceptible and that they're going to have any issues. So they don't really put any effort into it. I mean, construction companies and manufacturers have been big targets of cyber criminals for a long time for that reason.
Yeah, and they have the BIMA systems, where all the foremans have iPads out there in the field, and even those systems have intellectual property on them, like how they're building these buildings, the information they have on their manufacturers, their suppliers, their vendors, all that's needs to be kept secret. So there's a lot of information out there that they may not realize is sensitive, but it is.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, it's a never-ending series of rabbit holes you can go down, but you literally have to go down almost every single one of them in order to make sure you're trying to stay ahead of the curve. It's crazy. Like, it's
Okay, so like let's talk rabbit holes, right? And I can put on my tinfoil hat right now. So the AI systems, we have ChatGPT, we have Google's Bard, but did you know they have Fraud GPT?
no.
You know they have this other one called Dark Bart, Dark Baird. They're training AIs on the dark web. They're using data, terabytes of data from the dark web to train evil AIs, so that they can, you can be like, hey, how did this one vulnerability go? Like, how can I look for companies with log4j um, vulnerabilities? They can write code in order to create new malware. And then the tinfoil hat part is, right, we're all worried about AI having a singularity, right? Like ChatGPT, like becoming awake, right? What if one of these bad AIs have become awake?
It's like
So
Venom.
yeah, yeah. So it's uh it's kind of a interesting road we're going down. That is, we can't really turn away from it right now. I mean, I feel like it's very hard to go away from what's happening right now, but there are some, kind of doomsday scenarios that we could kind of go down if we really wanted to.
I bet there are, man. I mean, look, I've long said that if people can think about it to put it into the plot of a movie, it probably happens in real life anyhow. And there's been all kinds of crazy stuff we've seen movies about. The show 24 scared the living daylights out of me when it was on, because there's no way that that kind of stuff doesn't happen in real life and we just don't know about it. So there's no telling, and especially with how people operate on the dark web and all of that, that's nuts. I can't even imagine.
24 was a great show. It was
Oh yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland, such a great actor. It
Oh
was
yeah.
people talking on cell phones from SUVs.
Yeah. It was
It was like
fantastic.
all these great conversations that were so crazy. So yeah, I love 24. That's a good one.
So I think what you just told me is we need to have you come back and do a whole episode on conspiracy theories around cyber and AI.
I mean, the election's coming up right now. I could think of a couple of conspiracy theories
Oh,
there.
there's an election?
Yeah, I mean, just the amount of pull that the technology industrial complex has in our elections right now is very troublesome. The amount of influence that companies like Google, Meta have with what they show you, what search results they show you, can definitely make a difference in close elections. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that, yeah, it does sound like sci-fi, but it is happening. Whether we know it or not, we just don't know like how much we're being influenced by these big companies.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I have a feeling that we're going to see a whole lot more about how much influence they have over the course of the next 2 weeks, if I had to guess, because there's all kinds of allegations that are already coming out from, bad actors from outside the US, but there's probably plenty inside too that are looking to do their own thing, but we don't have enough time to get into it. So listen, man, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day for jumping on and having a
Absolutely.
conversation. It's been cool to chat with you and just spend some time going back and forth. But yeah, let's unofficially agree that after the first of the year, when everything settles down, let's go down some rabbit holes. I think it would be good fodder for the audience, if nothing else. But I'm interested to hear what you see because I don't spend nearly as much time immersing myself in this as what it appears you do. So it would be worth my time just to hear what you're finding as you go down your rabbit holes.
Yeah, we could do the conspiracy theory show.
Sounds good, man. Sounds good. Well, listen, I hope you have a great weekend. Everybody else, we'll catch you next time. See